Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. Today we have yet another episode in our World in Flames Days of Decision 3 combined playthrough. We're going to wrap up the 1937 year, starting with the November-December turn, and I don't anticipate a real long turn this time out, so we will almost certainly get to January, February 1938, and depending upon how long that turn goes, I think there's a decent chance we might even get into March, April with this episode. And we're wrapping up a year here where things have started to pick up steam, particularly in the second half of the year. We had a big political phase last turn with a number of developments. The Spanish Civil War is in full swing now, and 1938 promises to be an even busier, bigger year yet, if for no other reason than we have 5 of the major powers that will become eligible to gear up once we hit 1938, and I imagine many, if not most of them, will be looking to do so as quickly as possible. So we've got a lot of stuff coming at you today in this episode. Let's just get started with the political phase for November-December 1937. Well, after the political flurry of options last turn and the heavy political spending, relatively speaking, over the last couple of turns, combined with the naval building spree that a lot of the major powers are on, it's not leaving a lot of money in the bank right now. If we were to review that real quickly, we'll see that Germany sits at the top, and you've heard that quite a bit so far this game, I think, but with only 3 Reichsmarks. Next comes Italy with 2, France has 1, and then we've got the US, China, Japan, and the Soviet Union all sitting at 0, while the Commonwealth brings up the rear now at -3. So an unusual position for the Commonwealth to be in the negatives, and that kind of gives you an idea of just how slim the money has been over the last few turns. Now, with that in mind, we only have a couple of powers that bothered to bid this turn. One of those is Germany, which is probably to be expected. They're bidding 1 in, if for no other reason, to try to maintain that first position with their +4 bid modifier. The other country that actually bid is France, and not that France necessarily wants to do a lot of political stuff, but recall she has not yet done her election for 1937, so she's pretty much forced to do that election either this turn, or she's not going to be able to do anything else until that election gets out of the way. And seeing as how come January, February 1938, she will be eligible to gear up, which will increase her income. She doesn't want to put that off any longer than is necessary, so she's hoping to get the election out of the way this turn. Everybody else is going to be bidding 0, trying to save up some money here with an eye for the next couple of turns and perhaps a gear up in store for them. So when we look at the political initiative here, we see that Germany bid 1, +4 is a total of 5. That's going to be good enough to keep her in first place. France bid 1, she's going to get +2 for a total of 3. That moves her into second place. And now among the non-bidding powers, we actually have the Soviets and the Commonwealth are going to be tied with 3 each. However, the political effectiveness of the Soviet Union is going to come out on top of the Commonwealth. So the Soviets are going to slip to 3rd, and the Commonwealth is going to come in at 4th. Now we've got Japan, who is going to stay in 5th with 2. And then Italy and the United States are both going to be tied at 1 each. Again, the Italian political effectiveness trumping the Americans. Then it's going to be 6th, 7th, and then China bringing up the rear at 8. Now, with just 2 bidders here, I expect this to be a pretty short political phase, and then we will get into the whiff portion of the phase. First up, Germany. Let's see what Germany wants to do here in November, December 1937. There's nothing Germany wants to do necessarily this turn. However, she has been waiting 2 years to gear up, and next turn is January, February 1938. And even though she's sitting in the top spot, she wants to make sure that she's in the top spot next turn so that nobody can prevent her from conducting that gear up. To help ensure that, she is going to choose option 0G, increased bid points. You can see this is going to cost her 0 money. and she's going to get twice as many bid points as her current modified political effectiveness, which happens to be 5. So she's going to pull in a whopping plus 10 bid points towards her bid next turn in January, February. Should be enough to put her well over the top. You can also see there are no minor country effects here and no U.S. entry. In fact, it says you may not activate a minor this turn, which means we're not even going to the map here. Germany is just going to pocket those extra 10 bid points for January, February 38. I've already paid the 1 for the bid. There's no money cost here. So really, we're just rolling to see if she ends the turn on France. Anything but a 1, and France will get a chance to hold her elections. And it was a 10, so we are on to France. Moving on to France, they need to hold an election here in 1937, and that's exactly what they're going to do here in November, December. They're going to select French option 0C, hold election. You can see this is going to cost 0 money as well. We've deducted the 1 for the bid, and there are no minor country effects, no U.S. entry effects. And they are simply going to hold an election. I don't believe they get to activate a minor country with this option either. So they have met their required annual election. That's also going to bring us to the end of what is a very, very short political phase, probably the shortest we've had, well, maybe so far in the game. And that's going to send us right into the whiff portion of the turn. I'll roll for weather, which promises to be rather abysmal this turn. We'll roll for initiative, and then we'll take a look and see what reinforcements everyone is getting here at the end of 1937. Well, this should tell you everything you need to know about the weather roll this turn. We rolled a 9, plus 3 gave us a 12. That is blizzard in Arctic, blizzard in North Temperate, blizzard in the Med, storm in North and South Monsoon, and rain in South Temperate. So, yeah, we're going to have a short turn with probably a whole lot of nothing going on, except some white stuff coming down. Now, with regards to initiative for this turn, the Axis won handily, and knowing that, or anticipating the odds of really bad weather occurring, they decided to go last in the turn. The Communists actually came in second, and the Democrats rolled very poorly. And so the Democrats are actually going to be stuck going first. Then we have the Communists, and then the Fascists coming up in the third position. The marker is going to move up 3 after each of the impulses. So again, this promises to be a fairly short turn with not much happening on the maps. Now, that said, let's take a look at the reinforcements for everybody. The Commonwealth got a convoy point and a tanker point. The French added 2 more tanker points. The Commonwealth also is getting the HMS Furious, another aircraft carrier for them. The Japanese are adding a carrier plane, which will go into the reserve pool for now, and a convoy point. The Chinese actually get to add a communist cavalry corps. And then everything else, it looks like it belongs to the Spanish. The Republicans get Azania as their headquarters. They also receive a pilot, which comes in handy because they will be placing those pilots in this fighter aircraft. And then they also are getting a division and another infantry corps. So a pretty big turn for the Republicans. We'll see if they're able to use it to any advantage. Probably not with the weather. The Nationalists answer with a very good infantry corps and a not so good infantry corps. So the Republican edge in production seems to be showing up here. But again, like I said, almost all of the force pools are empty for both of them. In fact, the only thing currently in either force pool is 1 nationalist fighter aircraft. Now, that's going to change heading into January, February with the end of year or the annual additions, but they won't be available to be built at the end of this turn. They're going to have to wait another turn. So unless something gets destroyed on map in combat, which is always a possibility, particularly the way the Republicans have been attacking, it's going to be probably a very light reinforcement over the next couple of turns for both sides. So I'll go ahead and get these placed on map, and then we'll pick up, on map with the Democrats' first impulse. There's really not going to be anything happening. I think the Royal Navy has received a couple of aircraft carriers over the last couple of turns, and I think they would like to get them out to Force H or maybe the Med Fleet, which are currently not in the UK. However, it's no point in sending an aircraft carrier out until it has some carrier planes on it, and I think that's what's holding them back for now. So I don't know that the Democrats are going to be doing anything outside of the Spanish Republicans. So there's a good chance we will pick back up in Spain. Now, before we head to Spain, where really not much is probably going to be happening this impulse, we're dealing with the Democrats here. I did want to just point out a couple of things that happened last turn that I don't think I mentioned. With the signing of that agreement between the nationalists and communists, they did start to attempt to redeploy a little bit further to the east. As you can see, they really didn't get very far. China is limited to just 2 land moves in a combined. And with the bad weather, everybody was inverted as soon as they moved. But the redeployment is starting to proceed as best it can. Really, there's no real good rail network in here where the nationalists were, so they're basically going to have to march over the mountains before they can get tied in with the rail network in the east, which would make the deployment proceed a little more quickly. Of note also, for both the Commonwealth and the French, the addition of the tanker points has allowed the Commonwealth to establish a pipeline of tanker points to pull in the Saudi resource through the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, through the Mediterranean, and then back up to the UK. And France is able to pull in the second oil, which is coming from Venezuela, under the UK trade agreement. So both of those countries will be seeing another resource available for production. I don't think it's going to affect the French build point total, though, because of their production multiple. However, I do think the UK or the Commonwealth will see an increase here in build points. That brings us back to Spain. It's a combined impulse. 3 land moves. The French aren't going to be really doing anything. The blizzard weather really is going to shut everything down. You can see the Republicans got their brand new Air Force here just in time for it to be grounded by the snow and blizzard. So really we're just looking at potentially some redeployment. They were able to place their new division and infantry corps here in Valencia. They will go ahead and move the cavalry and infantry up 1 hex. That's going to cost them 4, so they'll be able to remain face up. Now we've got 1 more unit we can move. Thinking, I believe Azania there or not. Supply range is reduced to 2 hexes here in European map hexes in Blizzard. So the Guard Corps is still in supply. I think they will move here for 2. And that's it. Those are the 3 movement. There's no land attacks, obviously. And that's going to wrap up a very short Democrat impulse. It's going to move up 3, 1, 2, 3, and we come to the communists, who again are content to just sit idle and not do anything, watching with a little bit of interest in what's happening in Spain. That's going to move it up another 3 boxes to the 7 box, and we get to the fascist first impulse. Now the turn still cannot end on this impulse, so we will have at least 1 more weather roll. Maybe the weather will be a little bit better next time around. The nationalists, as you can see, placed both of their reinforcements here in Zaragoza. The Italians are going to use the naval move. The one thing not affected by the bad weather are the transports, so they're going to leave Eritrea with the artillery unit. They're going to make it as far as the Eastern Med, and that's it until the return to base step at the end of the turn. With the land moves available, Are we going to, yeah, I guess we'll leave Badoglio there for now. The Italians, I don't think, will do anything else on land. The Nationalists, therefore, will have up to 3 land moves they can use, and they're going to use 2 of them here to advance the new reinforcements out. You can see we're actually starting to form somewhat of a line here in eastern Spain. Again, it'll be interesting to see what happens once the bad weather breaks and we get into some decent weather, as both sides are going to be positioning or trying to position, given the terrain and weather, to launch some attacks and maybe get a little bit of an advantage right out of the gates when spring comes. So that's going to do it for a very short fascist impulse, just thinking if the Japanese are going to do anything, and I can't really see anything for them to do. So we're going to go ahead and make the weather roll, and we'll see if things get better or if it's just a short turn. As a matter of fact, if it continues to be really bad weather like this, I will probably just run through the turn off screen and just come back and update you with whatever minor adjustments certainly have occurred here in Spain. If something changes and the weather gets good, there's an attack, obviously we'll get that on screen. But if it's just going to be a short kind of nothing burger of a turn, I'll just not waste your time, and we'll skip right to the summary at the end. Well, the weather actually stayed really bad. Rolled a 10, plus 2 is 12. Same weather as the initial set of impulses, and then we went to a third set of impulses, and it was the same. I rolled another 10, so the weather was very bad. The only thing that really happened here in Spain, you could see the Nationalists did move into the forest here. General Lasagna came out from Madrid, so we do have a couple of pretty good looking lines right here, although it'll be interesting to see, like I said, what if anything happens, because neither one of the armies are in much of a position to get a decent odds attack, so they may just be kind of staring at each other saying, you know, you go first, because anybody who is attacking an opponent who is face down is going to have a pretty good advantage. And of course, a failed attack pretty much assures you are going to be face down. The Nationalists also did move the militia unit into the mountains here. And I'll just go ahead and finish up with the final reorganization. The Italians rebased the transports back to Taranto, so they have their artillery home again. And that's really it. The Chinese managed to get another hex further to the east, but everybody was inverted as a result of the bad weather and doubled terrain costs. So they're still quite a ways from where they need to be, but at least a couple of the nationalist forces are across the mountains and on rail lines. So next turn, if they're given the chance, they should be able to get a little bit further, get into a more useful location. As a matter of fact, I'll just show you here real quick before we head over for production. This is basically the situation in China at this point. The Chaicom cavalry unit moved into the mountains here along with Mao, and then the Second Army here advanced a little bit further. Chang made it to Xi'an, and the cavalry corps made it here to Changchao. So that's it for a very short, very uneventful, but not totally unexpected November-December 1937. We do have some production left, and then we are going to dive right into 1938, so stay tuned. Well, heading into the last production for 1937, we will begin with the Fascist. Actually, I guess I can say that the production numbers for this turn did change for the Commonwealth. All the other nations remained the same. The Commonwealth increased from 5 build points to 6 build points, with the addition of the Saudi oil being shipped into the UK. For the Fascist builds, we'll start with Italy. Italy built an aircraft carrier last turn. They are going to continue that with this turn. Actually, I guess we can start with the Americans. Since I've got the Yorktown down here, the Americans are pulling the Yorktown out of the construction pool. That cost them 3. And the Italians are going to match that by building their second aircraft carrier, Sparviero, and they are going to build a carrier plane to go on their carriers, and they're also training pilots to fly said carrier planes that will end up on one of their new carriers next year. That cost them a total of 4 build points. Germany also didn't want to miss the bus on the aircraft carrier spree. They pulled Graf Zeppelin out of the construction pool. They've begun the second cycle on Graf Zeppelin. They are training a pilot, and they are building a fighter plane. That's a total of 6 build points. Japan is not going with the aircraft carriers, but she is starting first cycle of a battleship. She is also building the first cycle of an amphib here and some carrier planes. That's going to run her also a grand total of 6 build points. The communists are getting back into the building game by building yet another infantry corps. That'll show up in a couple of turns. That cost them a total of 3. France is they didn't have a whole lot of money after a relative spending spree the last couple of turns, so the only thing they're doing this turn is training some pilots for a total cost of 2. Commonwealth likewise is still to recover from the political spending she did earlier in the year. She is going to start another very inexpensive light cruiser and train some pilots as well. That's going to cost her a total of 3. China is with 1 build point, is not going to spend anything. We talked about the U.S. getting the USS Yorktown on the production circle. That brings us to the Spanish. The Republicans actually have 9 build points, but they have nothing in their force pool right now. So they're not going to build anything this turn. The Nationalists, as we mentioned last time, have a fighter which they will build. They're also going to train some pilots. Again, I'm going to use the Chinese Communist pilots and training marker to signify or represent the Spanish nationalist pilots in training. And with that, we have completed our second year of the game. Again, things are beginning to speed up. I think 1938 definitely promises to continue that trend, and more things are going to happen. We had a short turn, very short turn here in November, December, which means we're ready to roll right into January, February 1938. Before we do that, though, I am going to get out all of the annual Force Pool editions, add those to the cups, and then we'll pick up with the political phase like we always do. Back in a minute. January, February 1938. We have 2 years in the books now, and it's been a little subtle, but I think over the last, certainly the last half of 1937, really ever since the Spanish Civil War broke out, there's been an increase in the tempo of activity, and I expect we will see that really start to pick up here in 1938. Now, entering the new year, the Germans have 3 Reichsmarks in the bank. The French, Italians, and Chinese each have 1 in the bank. Everyone else, that'd be the U.S., Commonwealth, Soviet Union, and Japan, are sitting at 0. But that has not stopped a few of the major powers from actually doing some bidding. Now, Germany, knowing that she's sitting on those 10 bonus bid points from the option she did in November, December, is only going to bid 1. She's going to add 4 to that, so that's really going to give her a 15 bid for a single actual bid point. The 2 other fascist powers, Japan and Italy, are going to sit this particular political turnout and not bid. The Soviet Union is bidding 1, again looking to take advantage of the nice +3 bid modifier that they currently have. And then the Commonwealth and France each also bid 1, while the U.S. and China are bidding their usual zeros, at least at this point in the game. So what does that mean for our political order? Well, Germany, no surprise there, with a 15 total, is going to remain in the top spot. Soviet Union, with their 1 + 3, that gives them 4. That's going to be good enough to creep up there into the second position. While France, who also bid 1 and had the +3 for 4, tied the Soviets, So we had to come over here to the political effectiveness, and you can see the Soviets' higher political effectiveness broke that tie. So they kind of flip-flop positions there on the initiative track. And then finally, the Commonwealth is going to stay in fourth here, being the last power that actually bid. Of the non-bidders then, you can see Japan with 0 + 2 is going to stay in fifth. Sixth place is a tie with Italy and the United States, each having bid 1. Italy's political effectiveness is going to keep her in sixth, and then the United States seventh, and China bringing up the rear in the eighth position. We'll put the last card marker there next to the Commonwealth. And as has been the case with many, if not most, of the turns so far in the game, we're going to start off with Germany and their option. Now, Germany, believe it or not, has actually missed an opportunity here. Yes, she did secure the first bid position, and yes, she is going to get to do the gear up that she has been waiting to do for 2 years now. However, she's been so focused on that gear up that she didn't really take into account the possibility of doing a second political option. Because remember, each major power during each political phase can do 1 or 2 options. Now, the reason we haven't seen anybody trying to pull off 2 options so far is that when you do 2 political options, you have to take your bid total and you divide it basically by 2. And most of the winning bids or the higher bids we've seen have still only been in the range of 5 or 6, maybe 7. And if you're cutting that in half, that's a little risky. You don't know that you're going to necessarily still have enough bid power, if you will, remaining to secure that good bid position that most of the major powers, when they bid, are looking to get. In Germany's case this turn, though, she had 15. So even if she does 2 bids and divides that in half, that's still 7.5. That was more than enough. That was almost double the next closest one. So Germany, again, could have been doing this gear up as well as something else. Now, it's not a total disaster, frankly, because as you can see, the gear up for Germany is going to cost 10, and she's only got 2 right now after her bid of 1. So she's going to be at -8 as it is. Were she to have attempted another political option, she would have had to pay that. She'd be even more in debt. So, but still, something to keep in mind. And it goes to show that it's not just Chamberlain that can screw up on the political stage from time to time. So, with that out of the way, as we said, Germany is going to gear up here. You can see the prerequisites. She is fascist. She could have geared up anytime so far this game. The thing that kept her from doing that, though, was the money cost. So it would have cost 30 if she had done it in 1936. Would have cost 20 if she had tried to do it last year. 1938 is the current year, which is greater than or equal to the year specified on the PM track. 1938 for Germany for her first gear up. So she's going to jump on that and not waste any more time. As we mentioned, it does cost 10 money. That's going to put her at -8. However, the thought there is that her increased production will more than make up for that over the next turn or 2. And as far as minor country effects, you can see there are a whole lot of minor countries that are sitting up and taking notice when Germany decides to gear up. In addition to that, the U.S. entry is a fairly substantial hit at +9. So that is going to, I believe, raise Germany's U.S. entry level, specific U.S. entry level, to 30. And of course, that's going to therefore increase the modified U.S. entry level, but I still don't think they've got much to worry about as far as any real reactions or actions from the U.S. yet. So with all of that, we're going to go ahead and record these. We'll also activate a minor country, and we'll do that over on the maps. But basically, this just increases the production multiple by 1 level. So Germany, which has been sitting at 1/2 production multiple, is now going to have a PM of 3/4. And I anticipate that that will increase her production from 7 to 11. But I'll verify that when we get to the production phase at the end of the turn here. But should be a decent increase for Germany, which could be bad news for some of her European neighbors. So over to the map to implement the minor country actions and choose a minor to activate. Well, minor reaction to the German gear up was rather widespread, ranging from the Americas with countries like Mexico, Chile, and Argentina, all the way to Turkey. And those four, somewhat surprisingly, kind of approved of it. Germany picked up one positive influence in each of those four nations. Now, not surprisingly, is that almost all of Germany's neighbors were less enthusiastic about it. Austria was enthusiastic, though, and Germany picked up +2 influence to bring her current influence to +3 right there. The nation that had the biggest negative reaction was Belgium, where Germany suffered -3 influence. Sweden didn't particularly care for it, so Germany lost the one positive influence she had there. Finland was mildly in favor of it with +1. The Baltic states, Germany was able to pick up +2 influence there, so she's sitting on 3 right now. And I'm thinking that maybe the Baltics were happy to see Germany gear up because they see it as a counterweight to this gigantic Soviet behemoth on their borders, and perhaps the Baltics may welcome some political advances from the Germans and seek to enter a more closer union with them. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if that's on the cards for Germany. They certainly are in the northern Baltic region that Germany has been focused on diplomatically so far for the last couple of years, but we'll see whether or not Germany thinks they're important enough to spend any effort on, if you will. So that's going to bring us around to selecting a minor to activate, and with all of the political options that were getting played last turn, we saw a lot of minors getting activated, which really kind of clears out any built-up influence in there. So there's not a lot of good choices for Germany. I think, though, what they're going to settle on is they're going to activate Bulgaria here. They do have +2 influence there, so they'll at least be able to nudge the marker a little bit closer towards them. The Italians have -1, and so do the Soviets. So let's head to the status display, and we'll resolve these 3 control markers. Over on the status display, you can see we have Bulgaria here still located in the dead center of the neutral zone. Germany, Italy, and the Soviet markers there. Here come the control markers for the influence to resolve. The -1 for both the Soviets and the Italians are not going to be enough to move Bulgaria in either direction. So we'll go ahead and resolve those and by simply removing them. And then the +2 for Germany will be enough to get Bulgaria to get 1 hex closer, at least, to Germany. And that could, over time, Germany certainly would not mind getting Bulgaria in her political orbit. She does have at least some forces that could potentially be added to the Wehrmacht in the event of a war. She's reasonably strategically located, bordering both Turkey and being very close to the Soviets. And they're part of that southeast region that Germany would like to perhaps incorporate into a greater economic area. So the last thing we need to do is see if Germany manages to end the political phase prematurely on us. That's been one of her superpowers, if you will, so far this game. So this has no DRM because we're looking at no previous political options played. So anything but a 1 here. Oh, well, she's teasing us again with a 2. So for the Soviets, that's going to make them very happy because now they are on the clock for their political option. Now, the Soviets would love to follow in Germany's footsteps and conduct their gear up this turn. The problem is they started out at 0 money for the turn. They paid 1 for their bid, which puts them at -1. The cost for their gear up is 10. So that would leave them at minus 11. Unfortunately for the Soviet Union, their credit limit is only minus 10. So they can't afford the gear up this turn. So they're still going to take a page out of Germany's playbook, though, and having secured the right to play political option, they're going to select option 0G, increase bid points. This is not going to cost them any money. And you can see there's no U.S. entry effect or any effect on the miners. They're not going to activate a miner, but what it's going to do is give them twice their political effectiveness, which is currently 4. So they are going to have 8 bonus bid points going into the March-April turn, which combined with their current bid modifier for their second position, that's going to give them 11 just right out of the gate. They bid another 1. They've got a pretty good chance of securing a nice low initiative position next turn. What they need to do is make sure that they save enough money this turn to pay for their bid and the gear up next turn. And I think then all we need to do is roll to see if they end the political phase. That's one previously played option, so there's going to be a -1 to this die roll, which, like the Germans, they are flirting right on the edge there. That 3 minus 1 is a 2. So for the French, who are up next, they will in fact have an opportunity to play their political option, and the Soviets are well positioned to jump on perhaps even the first bid position next turn when they're looking to gear up and maybe knock Germany off of their perch here in the political phase. But that remains to be seen. Right now we're going to turn our attention to France. France, like Germany, is going to be gearing up as well, and they meet prerequisite B here. The current year is greater than or equal to the year specified on the PM track, which again is 1938. This is only going to cost the French 8 money, and if the Soviet gear up had only cost them 8, they would have done the same thing as Germany and France this turn, but that is not to be. So France, who started the turn with 1 money in the bank, they bid 1, took them to 0. This is going to take them to -8, which coincidentally puts them right down there with Germany. Her credit limit is the same as Italy and Japan's, and that's 15. So she's got some room to spare here. But what this gear up is going to do, it's going to increase her production multiple from 1/4 to 1/2. And this will, in fact, double her build points each turn from 3 to 6. So a nice increase for France. Still 6, not necessarily anything to write home about, but when you're only been building 3 per turn, producing 3 per turn, getting 6 is certainly going to help. Now they are sitting at -8 right now, so it's going to take a couple turns to kind of dig out of this debt hole, and that's without building anything. And I don't know if the French necessarily want to completely halt production. So we'll see how long it takes France to get back into the black. But you can see again here we have a fair number of minor countries that are going to react to this, and the U.S. entry for 1938 is +8. That's the first actual U.S. entry effect directly on France, so that'll increase the U.S. entry level, modified U.S. entry level against France. It's also going to have an effect on the U.S. entry, the modified U.S. entry level against Germany, because remember we are subtracting half of all other major powers. So even though Germany geared up and the U.S. reacted with +9, part of that's going to be offset by the fact that France also geared up. So I'll maybe at the end of the turn here with production, when we get into production, I might go ahead and summarize the U.S. entry values. Actually, maybe I'll wait. I'll do it here at the end of the political phase, since there won't be anything occurring, or there shouldn't be anything occurring during the WIF portion of the turn. So we'll go over the U.S. entry here in just a couple of minutes. Having paid for it and recorded the U.S. entry, I'm going to go over and again we'll record the minor effects and then select a minor country for France to activate. Well, the world's reaction to the French gear up was not quite as widespread as it was for Germany's. However, you can see that just about all of Central and Eastern Europe had some sort of opinion on it, as well as the Benelux countries up here. Belgium actually gave France -2 influence there, and I can't say as I really blame the Belgians. They've got to be getting a little nervous when the two large, powerful neighbors on either side of her decide to gear up their military production. I think at this point they're just hoping that it doesn't explode into an actual shooting war in the near future. Now, most of the little Entente countries, in fact, all of the little Entente countries that France is hoping to base her collective security strategy on, did in fact approve of the gear up. France picked up +2 influence in both Czechoslovakia and Poland, while Romania and Yugoslavia both approved, but not quite as much, only picking up 1 influence in those minors. Now, France needs to decide which minor country she wants to activate, and when I think about it, I think this may be the first political option France has played all game that has had any sort of minor effects. Let's see, they have signed a level 1 and level 2 treaty with the Commonwealth, but they let the Commonwealth take the lead on that. So countries were reacting to the Commonwealth and not to France. And other than that, I think she's done just a couple of elections. So the choice here, I think it's probably going to be either between Poland and Czechoslovakia, but we're going to go with Czechoslovakia. It's got, not only does it have the +2 French influence, but it does have -2 German influence. So let's activate Czechoslovakia and head over to the status display. Back at the status display, we can see the Czechs are located here solidly within the Democrat ideology and only 2 hexes away from France. Now we've got 2 control markers to resolve. We have the -2 German and the +2 French. And I think the order in which we resolve these may have an effect, maybe not. In either case, I think we are going to just go ahead and resolve the German -2 first. Now, Germany located down here, that's going to push the Czechs into one of these 2 hexes. They cannot get to this hex here because it's going to take 2 to move them, and then it's going to be +1 for crossing that boundary for a total cost of 3. However, the 2 points will be sufficient to push the Czechs here and get them next to France. Now the question is, are these 2 influence enough to get the marker actually into the same hex? Well, base cost is 2 to move. They are going to be moving towards France in the same ideology, so that's going to subtract 1 and lower the cost to 1, but we are crossing a boundary here from the free market to social democrat factions. It's going to bump it back up to 2, and I don't see any other increases. So yes, in fact, those 2 influence will be enough to get the Czechs stacked with France, which means they are now in a position for the French to align Czechoslovakia should they end up at war with somebody, namely Germany. And this, the French are very happy with their achievements here in this political phase. They managed to gear up and double their production moving forward, which is big. But they've also managed to really secure the first member of the Little Entente. Again, that group of Eastern European countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia specifically, that they are going to try to bring fully into their orbit and act as a counterweight to the east of Germany should the Germans decide to get any aggressive ideas about France and Western Europe. So with that completed and the French happy there, we have just one more item remaining to wrap up the political phase for France, and that's to see if they prematurely ended with the die roll. Now there is going to be a -2 die roll modifier to this roll because of the Soviet and German options that have previously been played, which means they've got about a 30% chance of actually ending the phase now and leaving the Commonwealth holding the bag, as it were. So let's see what happens here. And that 3 -2 gives them a 1, which does in fact end the turn, preventing the Commonwealth from executing their political options. So I don't know, perhaps a little Gallic revenge for the Chamberlain screw-up last year. Don't know, but in any event, that's going to do it for the political phase. We're now going to shift gears into the whiff portion of the turn. I'll go ahead and roll weather, which is most likely going to be poor at best, as well as initiative, and we'll take a look at the reinforcements that'll be appearing on map this turn. Actually, before we get into the whiff portion of the turn, I did mention a quick review of the current U.S. entry situation, especially following the gear up by both France and Germany. You can see here that the U.S. entry level against Germany sits at +30. However, because of the way the formula kicks in and the fact that the United States, actually their entry level against France increased by 8, the German modified U.S. entry, which is the level at which the U.S. is able to act upon, is only 20.5. Now, last turn I think it was 15.5, so it did increase some, but the full effect of the German gear up was offset to some degree by the French gear up. The Italy's U.S. entry, the modified U.S. entry against Italy, even though the actual U.S. entry did not change, it did creep up by half a point. And again, that's due to the one of the other fascist powers gearing up and then having that offset by a Democrat gearing up. We had the same effect here with Japan. It went from a 13 to a 13.5. Commonwealth is currently sitting at a U.S. entry of -12. France itself was -25 with the 2 gear ups, so that has increased very slightly to -21.5. So the United States is in no danger of actually doing anything aggressive against Commonwealth or France anytime soon. Of course, being in the same ideology, you cannot declare war on another partner in your ideology. The Russian modified U.S. entry remained the same. The Chinese actually improved a bit. I think it went from 25 to -25.5. And that kind of wraps up where we are now. It's, again, the lowest level for the U.S. to really start doing any U.S. entry options in whiff terms against any of the fascist powers, at least, would be 35 for Japan, and I believe it was 45 or 55 for Germany. So again, we are a ways from the U.S. starting to take any real active interest in trying to stop any of the aggressor nations. And largely that's because there really haven't been any aggressor nations to this point. Italy conquered Ethiopia almost 2 years ago, a year and a half, and since then things have been pretty quiet. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get weather, initiative, and reinforcements. The initiative roll for this turn, the fascist actually won initiative with a 10 + 2 for 12. The Democrats rolled a 6, but they're sitting in the -1 box, so that dropped them to a net total of 5. But the communists really came through for the Democrats, rolled a 1. Even with their +2, that only gave them a 3. So the Democrats decided, given the situation in Spain, well, not so much the situation in Spain, but the fact that this is probably going to be a bad weather turn. It's probably going to be short. If the Democrats had opted to let the communists go first, the fascists would be able to pick wherever they wanted to go. So they could potentially insert themselves between the communists and the Democrats and still beat the Democrats to the punch, or they could end up going last. The Democrats wanted to force the fascists to either, if the fascists were going to move before the Democrats in Spain, they wanted them to have to go first of all of the ideologies, and thus run the risk of getting more impulses than the other two ideologies, and therefore starting to shift the current initiative modifiers. So the Democrats opted to go ahead of the communists. The fascists, looking at the weather chart, looking at the situation in Spain, would they like to go before the Democrats? You know, sure, but is it worth potentially giving up their current +2 on the initiative? Given the chances for bad weather this turn, the fascists said, nah, it's not worth it. So the fascists are actually going to choose to go last, which means our initiative order for this turn is going to be Democrats, then Communists, and then finally Fascists going last of the group. Weather roll was a 4. There was a +2 to that from the bad weather last impulse. Gave us a 6 on the weather chart for January, February, which means we're looking at snow in Arctic and North Temperate, rain in the Mediterranean, fine in North Monsoon and South Temperate, and then storm in South Monsoon. Marker is going to go up 2 boxes after each impulse, and we do have a +1 for the next weather roll. Turning to the reinforcement or the production circle here, see what reinforcements we're getting this turn. We see the Spanish Republicans are going to pick up a garrison corps. The Japanese, ominously enough, are getting an infantry army and a convoy point. The Chinese, however, will be getting an infantry corps themselves. The Italians are going to be getting a pilot, and that's going to go on the track. We'll just record that on the track for now. The French get a single-seat fighter and a pilot, and I think the French are just going to go ahead and place their pilots in that aircraft. So they'll place this fighter on map. They also got a carrier plane, which will go into the reserve pool, awaiting a French carrier to show up. The Commonwealth got 2 convoy points and a tanker point. The French also added another tanker point of their own. For the Americans, it looks like they're going to get the USS North Carolina into the construction pool. The Germans are getting, looks like 2 ships here. They're getting the Peter Strasser and the heavy cruiser Lützow into the construction pool. And the Royal Navy is getting HMS Indomitable into the construction pool. So not a huge turn of reinforcements for anyone. The French are actually adding a bit to the Armée de l'Air, and we'll see what the infantry army showing up for the Japanese portends in the Far East. I'll get these units on map, and then we will head over for the Democrats' first impulse. We're going to start the Democrat impulse in the Far East with the Chinese. As you know, they've been trying to redeploy since the truce has been signed between the nationalists and the communists, and of course, like everything that's going on in China in this time period, it's happening very slowly. They will, under the combined impulse type, they do get 1 rail move and 2 land moves, so they are going to use their rail move to rail the 17th Army here down to Nanning. And with their 1 move, again, the weather in the North Temperate zone here is snow, so that shouldn't have any impact on movement point cost, fortunately, and it's fine weather down here below the weather line. They'd like to beef up their defenses here in the south, since currently they have just a single garrison unit basically south of Kunming, really south of Chongqing if you look at it that way, and a lot of their defense right now is dependent on local warlords. Let's see, the 2 moves they're going to do, go ahead and let's bring Chang here, and we'll bring this army out of the mountains into Xi'an. And that is about all the Chinese are going to do. So with that wrapped up, we can head back to Europe, where none of the Democrats are going to be doing any naval moves, including the Republicans in Spain. As a matter of fact, I think we can pretty much kind of head that way. We'll come across here, and just pointing out that the French decided to place their fighters on map here in Strasbourg, and looks like they're pretty evenly matched here against the Luftwaffe. As a matter of fact, they're completely at parity with them as far as fighters. They both have 1 fighter with a air-to-air strength of 3. They each have 1 bomber with a tactical factor of 2 and a strategic bombing of 3. So kind of interesting. We'll see how long the French Armée de l'Air can maintain parity with the Luftwaffe. I'm not thinking it's going to be too long. We get to Spain here, and we are looking at rain south of the blue line here. And while the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain, that doesn't mean it isn't a real pain in the butt in the mountains as well. That is going to be doubling the movement costs here. The Spanish Republicans placed their garrison reinforcement here in Valencia, which will free up the 3-3 Infantry Corps there to move out. The problem is it's all mountainous here, and with the movement cost doubled, if that infantry corps moves, it's going to be inverted, and we don't want anything face down really at all, but certainly not at the beginning of the term, particularly if there's hope of maybe the weather improving a bit and them being able to get out of Valencia and stay face up. I really think with the weather as it is, I don't see the Republicans doing much in the way of anything real aggressive. They've got 4, 8, 12, 17, 17 and a half, make that an 18 that they can bring against 8 here for the Nationalists, 18 to 8. That's about a 2-1, but then the rain is going to shift that one odds column to the left and make it a 3-2. We've seen how successful the Spanish Republicans have been with a 3-2 attack. They could throw in Azania with some offensive HQ support. That 2 divided by 4 is 0.5, which is enough to round up to give them an odd shift to the right to offset the rain, but they would prefer to have, if they're going to do that, they would prefer to make it count, as it were, and have it not just offset some weather penalties. So I think the Republicans, for the moment, are just going to kind of sit tight and wait to see if the weather improves. And with that, the impulse marker is going to move up 2 boxes on the track. That's over to the Communists for their first impulse. They really don't have anything to do. They did just gear, well, they did not gear up. They wanted to gear up. They haven't really gotten much in the way of forces to move at this point. So with that, they are not going to pass necessarily, but they are going to instead just basically do nothing. And we'll roll into the Fascist first impulse here coming up. Well, with the Fascist impulse, the situation in Spain right now, it's really a case of both sides kind of sitting there in the front lines, just staring across at the other guys. Neither one really wants to do anything offensive with the -1 odds shift due to the weather. The Nationalists have a couple of places where they might be able to get a 2-1 attack, but that would take almost their entire field army to do that, and that 2-1 attack would then, be shifted to 3-2, just like we were talking about with the Republicans. The Republicans, I think, may have a slight numerical advantage, and neither side is really keen on giving the other the advantage by having most of their forces flipped face down. Not, of course, unless they can get a decent chance of inflicting some real harm on the other side in that attack. So the situation in Spain, I think, is just going to be one of a sitzkrieg, where both sides are just kind of biding their time, riding out the winter weather. In the case of the Nationalists, they do have a headquarters and they'll get a fighter next term, but they won't have a pilot to put them in for another couple turns, not till summertime. But they do have the prospects of increasing their forces on map if they just wait. So I think the Nationalists are going to take a waiting game there in Spain. Germany and Italy don't really have anything else to do, other than the Italians have decided they are going to withdraw the other 3-3 Infantry Corps from Ethiopia, or rather from Eritrea, and leave just the one unit to garrison the East African portion of the empire, along with the territorial. So the transport, the very, very slow transport, has set sail from Taranto, is currently in the eastern Mediterranean, where it will remain until the return to base phase. In Asia, the Japanese are not doing much of anything. They did get an infantry corps this turn, which they've placed in Fukuoka in the home islands. Looking over their dispositions, I think they are going to go ahead and they are going to actually do something. Let's go take a look at the Far East here for a moment. There we are. Back in the Pacific, they are going to use their or a naval move to bring a transport out with that newly arrived infantry corps, and they're going to go into the 0 box here, and I think that is going to do it for their naval moves. And then when we skip on down to, I don't think there's any land movement, air transport, we'll get to debark units at sea. They are going to use a land move to debark the corps here in Port Arthur, and that is in the North Temperate, so it's snow there. There's no additional movement costs. He'll be able to debark and remain face up, but they've just added a relatively powerful unit there to the forces on the border with China. We'll see what, if anything, comes of that. And with that, that's going to wrap up the Fascist first impulse. There's no chance to end the turn here, so I'll go ahead and roll weather, and we'll see if the weather improves enough for anything to happen on map. If it doesn't, again, rather than have me just tell you that nothing's happening, I'll keep running through the turn until either something worth showing you guys occurs, or we get to the end of the turn and I can just wrap it up with who ended the turn, what the effects on the initiative modifiers are going to be for next turn, and maybe what the weather modifier may be. So back in a minute. Turns out we had 2 more rounds of impulses, and the weather got progressively worse pretty much everywhere except for North Temperate, where it remained snow throughout the turn, which did allow Chang to hustle along here and manage to get himself in supporting distance of the northeast frontier. They railed an army down here, and they railed another army right here into Sin. So that pretty much doubled, I think, the defense strength in this particular hex, which obviously is the most threatened by the current Japanese dispositions. They continued to push the cavalry corps slowly to the south here. I've done the return to base and final reorganization for everyone. You can see as we come back to the west here that the Italian transport made it to East Africa. They will be departing next turn carrying that infantry corps. And then in Europe, really there was literally no changes to anything on the map. We come back to a very familiar looking situation here in Spain. And I believe the only thing we have left to do to wrap up January, February is production. So I'll go ahead and calculate the new production totals, which are going to change for at least Germany and France, and then figure out what everyone is building, and we will pick back up on the production circle. In calculating production for the turn, 2 major powers build point totals did increase, and that was both of the major powers that did their gear ups this turn. Germany's production increased from 7 build points to 11 build points, and she's still able to save an oil. And France's production jumped from 3 build points to 6 build points, also with the ability to save an oil. In fact, all of the major powers are saving 1 oil except for Japan and China. And with that, what did the major powers decide to do this turn? Well, it's the beginning of the year, so there were a number of force pool additions for everyone this turn. The Italians believe that naval aviation is going to be the key to future control of the seas. Therefore, they laid down yet another aircraft carrier, although this is smaller than the first 2 that they've laid down. And they have built a single-engine naval air bomber for a grand total of 3 build points this turn. Germany, to the delight of Admiral Raeder, has decided to pull Tirpitz out of the construction pool and begin her second cycle for just 2 build points. And I believe when Tirpitz hits the waves at the beginning of 1939, she will be the most powerful surface ship in European waters. And for the final member of the fascist ideology, the Japanese are laying down another aircraft carrier, and they are also training some pilots. That's going to be a total cost of 4 for the Japanese. Now, the Soviet Union, after Stalin liquidated his finance minister and about 2/3 of the commissariat for their failure in making the gear up happen this turn, the new replacement minister has decided that perhaps not spending anything this turn would be in his own as well as the Glorious Revolution's best interest. So the Soviets are going to sit tight and hold on to the 2 rubles that they currently possess. France, who is just giddy over doubling her production, even though she's still in the red, the elation has worn off a bit when she looks across her eastern borders and realizes that Germany also geared up. And a closer inspection of her defenses in Alsace-Lorraine show that they could use some strengthening. So she is turning to build up her army this turn, but being in debt, she was looking for something cheap, so she settled on a garrison unit, which will hopefully help fortify the eastern borders should the Germans get a little rambunctious. As for the Commonwealth is going to build a carrier plane. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are also going to build some transports. And that's going to be a total cost of 2 for the Commonwealth. Now, keep in mind that they were hoping to play an option this turn, which would have been gearing up, but the political phase ended before it got to them. So with the cost of the gear up looming, hopefully next turn for them, they were a little more refrained in their military expenditures this turn. So just the transport and the carrier plane for a total cost of 2 build points. China, who has 2 yuan in the bank, is going to hold on to those, hoping to be able to build perhaps an infantry corps next turn when they get, or an infantry army for the Chinese, when they get another build point. That brings us to the United States as the last of the major powers. They are laying down a battleship. They are also pulling the USS Brooklyn out of the construction pool and beginning the second cycle on her, as well as building a carrier plane. And that's going to cost them a total of 3 build points. Now, for the Spanish, believe it or not, the Spanish Republicans did not receive a single annual addition to their force pool. So what that means is they've got nothing in the cups now, and once any reinforcements that are on the production circle arrive, that's it. They've maxed out until 1939, where they will get, I think it's 1 or 2 units will appear in 1939 if they can survive that long. And I don't believe they really have anything left on the circle. I think the last of their reinforcements arrived this turn. So it looks like as we move into spring here, it may be do or die time for the Republicans. The Nationalists, on the other hand, did get some additions to their force pool, and of those, they began construction of a motorized corps. That cost them 4 build points, which again wasted a couple of build points. They've got 6 right now. They do have some units in the cup still in their force pools that they can build. They just couldn't afford them this turn. So things may start to swing to the Nationalists here over the course of the next 3 or 4 turns as they continue to receive reinforcements while the Republicans have kind of maxed out their on-map presence. And with that, we've wrapped up production for January, February 1938, and we are ready to move into March, April 1938. However, I think this video is again approaching our target time length of about 1 hour, give or take. And March, April, the weather should be much improved. Could turn out to be a longer turn than we've seen for both November, December, and January, February. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and we'll end this episode here, wrap this up today. And I will start working on this, as well as continue to press forward and begin filming March, April, so we can see what's happening. Just looking ahead from the perspective of several of the major powers, I do think we are going to see some fairly significant developments begin to occur here within the next turn or two. So that's going to do it for today. Once again, as always, really appreciate you all watching. Hope you're enjoying it, finding this interesting, maybe even a little educational, as far as how Days of Decision and WIF sort of integrate together. And we will see you next time.